BookTV recently visited Capitol Hill to ask members of Congress what they're reading this summer.
Well, right now I'm reading Courage and Consequence. It's written by Karl Rove, and I'm only about halfway through it right now, but its focus is on sort of the political strategies of how that were used to sort of propel George Bush in a position where he could run for governor and win in a race that was determined to be not winnable. But of course they proved that wrong. And then after that, the political strategy in moving him from the governor's office in Texas to a candidate for, and eventually, of course, becoming president of the United States. It starts out with a description of Karl Rove's personal life and how he became involved in politics and some of his ups and downs in the beginning of his career. So I find that very fascinating. I like to read books that are factual. So I'm not a fiction reader. I like to read about history, and I like to read about real people and real events.
Now you have read a couple books on some of your favorite presidents. Do you care to talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, so I'm an Abe Lincoln fan. I really like the idea of bringing those, that are maybe not the most friendly to your cause around you. And, Mr. Lincoln is famous for bringing some of his enemies into his cabinet. And it's a fascinating story on how he was unable to run the country and the courage that it took to move through the Civil War. And then also another favorite of mine is Teddy Roosevelt. And so this is just one example of one of the Teddy Roosevelt books that I've read. There's been many. And this one is special because I happened to visit with Teddy Roosevelt IV. He was in my office, and he autographed this book of his ancestor for me. So he, like his ancestor, President Roosevelt, is very interested and involved in the environment. So it's also, as I met him and knew about Teddy Roosevelt and the passion he had for the environment, it's real interesting to see how that's passed down from generation to generation. So it was a pleasure to meet with Teddy Roosevelt IV.
Now you've authored a book, and the proceeds go to charity.
Yeah, so I think this book came out in 2004. I was a homicide detective in the early 80s and became the lead detective in a case called the Green River serial murder case. And over a 19-year span, this, I'm going to call him the devil of a human being, a monster of a human being. It took the lives of somewhere between 60 and 70 people. He pled guilty when we finally caught him through DNA and microscopic paint evidence. He pled guilty to 49 murders. We closed 51 cases, so there were a couple of cases that we didn't have all the evidence we needed to charge him with it, but we knew he had committed those too. So we've closed 51 murder cases. This book describes in the beginning a little bit of my childhood, a little bit of my early life, and the struggles that I had growing up. I'm a runaway, and so some of those struggles are described in the book, but mostly focused on the investigation of the murders and the day-to-day activity of the task force, the team that was involved in this over the years, tremendously talented, committed people, from detectives to volunteers, scientists, civilian employees who entered data. This is before the era of computers. So I am very proud to say too that this book, all the proceeds go to the Pediatric Interim Care Center in Kent, and they're known for their ability to take in drug-addicted babies and put them through treatment withdrawal from those drugs, and get them into foster homes or adopted homes or back with their biological parents. 2 of my grandchildren are from the Pediatric Interim Care Center. They were adopted by my daughter Tabitha and her husband Ken. And Emma and Briar were adopted. They're a year apart at 3 months old each, and they're now 16 and 15, and they're just doing awesome. So PIC does an awesome job. All the proceeds from the book go to PIC, and you know, a special acknowledgement to the families of the victims who lost their daughters, and also a special thanks and recognition to all those detectives and the entire team that stayed with this case for so long to catch the monster that did this.
BookTV wants to know what you're reading. Send us your summer reading list at BookTV on Twitter, Instagram, or on Facebook. BookTV on C-SPAN 2, television for serious readers.